There we go. Good afternoon. Today is Tuesday, January 21st, and this is the 4 o'clock informational meeting of the Sioux Falls City Council. And I'd like to welcome everybody that's here today. Good afternoon. We have called a meeting to order, and first on our agenda, I was going to ask for a Public Services Committee, but Councilor Anderson isn't here. Did anybody else on the committee want to give us a brief update as far as the last meeting?
I can.
Councilor Erpenbach?
I can, yeah. We've mostly talked about the vehicle for hire ordinance, also known as the taxi ordinance, and we are really going through it line by line, and so there's lots of things happening with that. It's our hope that it will come before the full council in the next month or so, correct, Councilor Karski? And so very interesting, very in-depth conversation. I think the group is working really well, and we're taking lots of public input, so that's where we're at with that.
Thank you very much. Immediately following this meeting, we will have a Land Use Committee meeting. Councilor Rolfing, is there anything in particular that we're going to cover at this meeting?
Excuse me. Yes, there is. The main item on the agenda is the two things: Prairie Meadow subdivision and the potential financing for annexing that subdivision, and then TIF ordinance update on some information regarding, implementation of the application, the new application, et cetera. So we'll be going through 2 items at this point.
Thank you, Councilor. This is an opportunity for open discussion. Is there anything any of the councilors want to bring forward during the open discussion? Councilor Jamison, please.
Just a reminder that tomorrow morning I'll be in Pierre testifying for the Senate Transportation Committee, and really acknowledging that nearly $50 million were spent in Sioux Falls by the state of South Dakota. And that's a big impact for us on roads. And so we want to make sure that they know that we appreciate that, and we want them to keep coming. We like their partnership. But if there's any other details that you think I should convey, this is your time to pass them on. 7:45 tomorrow morning comes pretty fast. So that's all. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Is there anything else? Councilor Erpenbach.
I just half hour ago or so got an email. You'll recall that I'm the council representative on the Homeless Advisory Board, and I just have an update from Stacy Teason, who is the director of the Homeless Advisory Board. Just note that the Salvation Army warming center, which is open from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. during the winter, had 100 people there last night. They have cots for 80 people, and they've been running about 65 to 70 people, but now they're up to 100 on a regular basis. Just to note then that St. Francis House and Union Gospel Mission both have a little more strict rules about your condition if you come there in terms of alcohol or being under the influence of something. And so they do have openings. Both St. Francis and Union Gospel have openings for men and for women, and so it's just kind of an interesting, I just wanted folks to know that that's what's going on. That I did get emails that Sunday and Monday when it was just the bitter cold right around Christmas time, and just a reminder that the Salvation Army is doing that. It does have a subsidy from the city in terms of helping them to staff that area, but that it is definitely a need and that it is being used, and so just an update.
Thank you very much. Anything else? One other thing I'd like to bring up. On our agendas, on our council agendas, a lot of time if there's readings for ordinances or for resolutions, there on the bottom there's always a spot that says sponsored by the mayor/public works, the mayor/planning and building services. By law, we have to act on the things that are proposed by the respective departments that are brought forward in resolution or ordinance format, but it is not necessary to have this sponsored by on there. During our discovery portion, a lot of times that comes out. A lot of times people from Public Works will come up and they say, we're bringing forward this cleanup resolution or whatever it is. It was right before we got on here that the previous administration wanted to put that on there. But beginning in February, we're going to take that sponsorship designation off of our agendas. And it will not say mayor. A lot of times, if we propose something, a councilor does, a second councilor signs off on it. But if it's brought forward to the council, we have to act on it. And during our discovery or our conversation, a lot of times everybody brings that up. I was just going to take and pull that off the agenda. Is there any input from any of you on that? This was brought to our attention. I did have the city attorney. I asked him about that, and that is what the law reads, that we are obligated to bring forward with that. Councilor Rippenbach?
I just would wonder why, because it's always interesting to me, and I remember when it was changed, because I've always watched council, but I wonder why. What difference does it make if it's on there or not? And to me, it's more interesting that it is on there. That's all. I'm just wondering what the thought process is behind it, taking it off.
I just asked the city attorney if it was necessary.
Said we
He
don't
said
have
it
to have
wasn't.
it there, so out.
We got to act on the thing anyway, so.
Okay.
And that's my only thought. But I'm open to your suggestions, so that's why I'm just asking. Councilor Rolfing?
I somewhat see the idea of not having the mayor on, because it seems like the mayor's on every one of them, and perhaps the mayor wants that so that it clears through him before his department heads put it on the agenda. But I would think it may be interesting or informative to see what department brought it rather than the mayor all the time, too. I mean, not that, you know what I'm saying. If it just said Public Works or Park and Rec, that kind of thing, we'd know right away where it came from, rather than it always having the mayor, which, you know, I guess that would be my feeling more.
It has to, I think,
It has to come from
go through the
somebody.
mayor.
Yeah.
That, but it's always interesting to me, though, when it's council instituted or initiated, that it has the council members' names on it.
Okay.
I don't know, just food for thought.
Anybody else? Lori, did you want to, or Jim, did one of you guys want to give us a little input as far as what our attorney said?
Good afternoon, Jim David, City Council staff. We were just talking back there that, for example, if there's an appeal to a City Council action, a zoning appeal, that it would probably be listed as Mayor Planning Building Services on there, and it might give the impression that Planning Building Services actually supports that appeal. The other part is that the tennis agreement, I know that that was from the Parks Department, although it showed multiple departments. The mayor's office was in that one, but that was pulled. So the impression it gives, I think, was the point of actually removing that, just for the public's benefit. We all know what that means, but oftentimes those that are reading the agendas may be confused on what it actually intends to be, what it intended to be mean.
Right.
So,
Councilor Staggers, you had a question.
Yeah, I guess I was inclined to think that we ought to keep, the different departments that are most often supporting these on here, and then the mayor, unless he is actually supporting it, have him off of that. Because I remember one time we had a measure where the mayor was against it, but he was on there sponsoring it, and that just doesn't work right.
Okay. Councilor Rippenbach?
I see Mr. David's comments as valid, that it looks like an endorsement when it's really not. It's just the protocol to get it on the agenda. That makes sense to me, that if people are reading it as an endorsement, then I agree it should go. Because that's what Councilor Staggers is saying is exactly right. I remember a couple of times the mayor has been against it, but his name is on it as sponsor, so it sounds like he wants it to happen. So,
Councilor Rolfing?
I guess I hadn't looked at it from that standpoint, and I can see that point, so, I would go along with that.
Councilor Karski?
I guess the important point here is that it serves no legal purpose to have that on there, and it can be misleading. And in fact, anything from Planning and Building Services, we'll say the Planning Commission recommends approval or not. It goes through those committees, and it doesn't take a whole lot of time to be at a meeting or to be sitting in this seat to know if it's a park and rec thing, if it's planning or public works, if it's planning commission. So it really doesn't serve any purpose. It's just a vestige of a former administration that really doesn't need to be there.
Okay. Any other questions? No. I'm king on this one. No, I'm just kidding. Okay. I did, but I will pass on, though, that I did talk to the city attorney on this, and by law, we have to act on those things. And to that point, and Jim David actually brought it up a lot better than I did as far as being able to explain it better than I can. So I do appreciate that. Thank you very much. If there's any other comments, please let me know. Okay, otherwise this will be effective at the meeting in February. Thank you very much. Okay, we'll move on to our presentations. And the first presentation and our only presentation that we have on our agenda is one that's really dear to all of our hearts. Director Cotter, this is on snow removal. Thank you.
Yes, thanks for having us. Today we're going to take you through some of the background information, not only on the weather that we've received, some of the decision making and the operations that are behind the scenes. We also want to give you a sense of some of the technology that we use today and also some of the technology that we're looking toward in the future. And so Galen's going to do this presentation for you today, so we'll bring him forward. Galen Huber.
Good afternoon, Galen Huber, Street Fleet Manager for Public Works. I thought what I'd do is start out with just a general overview of what the winter has been since November 1st. Basically, we measured the winter from November 1st through the end of March, even though last April gave us a little bit of a surprise and the most snow of any one of the months. But basically, that's our time frame. Since November, we've had the following 9 days of precipitation in November, broken down by rain and snow. December, we had 19 inches, and in January, we had 12 inches. For a total of 23.6 inches through the year so far, which is we're just a little over halfway through, and our average is 45. So we're well on to our way for hitting the average of 45 inches for the year. I'll tell you that it's been a very active year for us as far as snow goes. We've only had 2 major snow events so far, and we've had a lot of 1 inch, 1.5 inch snow events. Even though it doesn't cause any issues so much for the traveling, we still have to have people on 24 hours a day to take care of every one of those low snow events. And I'll tell you that a 1 inch snowstorm is harder on my salt budget than a 6 inch snowstorm is, because I constantly have to keep applying it as it's coming. If I get 6 inches that I know is coming in, I probably only put it on once and wait till everything is plowed off and then put it on a second time. So it's been very active for us. It's been also a very extremely cold winter for us. This dates back, the November and December, this cold this early dates back to 72 and 73. So it's made our chemical take longer to react. And so we've had to play around a little bit about our application, knowing that we have this cold weather like we have coming in today and tonight. Since November, we've had 2 snow alerts. December 4th, there was a snow alert of 6.2 inches, and just last week, we had a snow alert on January 16th of 2.4 inches. A lot of times I get questions on what do you use to decide a snow alert? And it's a very good question because it's a moving target for us. Each event is different. And so some of the things that we look at is, first of all, the amount of snow that comes in. Usually it has to be over 2 inches before we start considering looking at that declaration of a snow event. The moisture content, whether it be dry or whether it be wet. If it's wet and 2 inches and you drive on it, gets very slippery. If it's dry and 2 inches, it usually packs and the safety factor is a little bit better. Timing of the snowfall. If it comes in like it did in December, where it came in right during rush hour traffic and went all the way through rush hour traffic, versus this last snowstorm that basically came in at night, everybody's asleep and we're working on the roads, they don't see us out there working. It makes it easier for us because there's less traffic. The duration of the snowfall in December, it lasted all day long. We couldn't even get off the emergencies for the first 15 hours. And then wind speed, this last snowstorm, when you get snow coming in, even if it's only 2 inches, and it's blowing at a consistent 40 with gusts of 67 was the gust they had at the airport, you have whiteout conditions within the city here, and you do have drifting. And we did have to call it, the major reason for calling the snow alert was not so much the snow amount as it was the amount of drifting that we had on the outer parts of the city, and even in the inner part of the city. And then the temperature before and after. As we get closer to the end of the winter here, and say we get a snow amount in March, and I have 50 degrees the next day is coming in, I may not plow out the city. And basically the rule of thumb for me is 1 inch is, when I call a snow alert, 1 inch of snow costs me, for every 1 inch of snow, it costs me approximately $150,000 to plow out. So if I can let 3 inches of snow lay on the ground and not plow it out and let the sun melt it, that's a savings for all of us within the city. And again, I just wanted to touch on the fact that I have the city broken into 18 snow districts. When I do call a snow alert, or if I'm in a de-icing operation, I put like equipment in each of those 18 districts. So everybody's being served equally. Like for a de-icing event, which we had yesterday, I had 2 sanders in each one of those 18 snow districts. It takes those approximately 2 hours to hit all of the emergency routes within those districts. Those districts have an odd configuration to them, and it's based on the number of emergency snow routes, the miles of secondary snow routes, and the miles of residential street that each one of those have. So each one of them basically finishes at the same time once they start. We're going through and revising it this year because the city has grown considerably since these 18 snow districts have been established, and we're probably looking to add at least 2 more snow districts so we can maintain the 2-hour time frame as far as a de-icing event and plus a snow removal. I just want to also mention that when we do call a snow alert, I do call contractors in. Contractors are a big part of the city's snow removal program. They handle about 40% of the snow removal on streets when we do a snow alert, and so they're a viable part of our operation to try to finish in less than 30 hours to plow out the city. And then my last slide that I like to go into and then open it up to questions is, Mark talked about technology. We have partnered with traffic engineering, and these are 5 cameras that are placed at each one of those 5 intersections that traffic engineering uses to monitor traffic flows throughout those intersections. Well, during the winter months, I use those to see how much tracking is going on within those intersections, and when the snow starts coming in, when to apply the chemical. For me, application of the chemical is crucial, so I don't get the roads too slippery out there before my chemical activates. So this is a technology that we've been using. We've had 2 cameras last year. We have 5 cameras this year. And Heath and traffic engineering has told me that there's probably going to be a couple more cameras that we're going to have available. That's like putting eyes in the city for me. We can actually look at it live time. Those shots were just taken this afternoon on each 5 of those on each one of those intersections, so that helps me out. The other thing is, I don't know if you heard over the weekend, the state of Iowa, their Department of Transportation has each one of their sanders with a GPS unit on it. I actually went to their website today, and I could see every sander in the state of Iowa where they were on state highways. They must have had like 200 sanders out, and they refresh about every 2 minutes. So if you sit there and watch, you'll see a cursor which is marking the sander, and then 2 minutes you'll see it moved. It's several miles down the street. That's a technology that I just had a meeting on today to take a look at doing the same thing in the city of Sioux Falls. It's important for me to know where my sanders have been, where they're at, where my motor graders have been, where they're at, but more importantly, the citizens ask me that a lot. When will the plows be in front of my street? And I'd love to have the technology to have them go to a server or to the web page and show them exactly where they're at. So that's kind of a quick, brief overview of the winter so far. Snow gates, I've had the snow gates. There's 6 of them that I own. I've had them out there. I'm using it as a training experience for me. And I'll give you an example. I had a phone call last week when we were out plowing snow. A gentleman called me up and he says, the operator that ran this, first of all, he put a snow gate on my street. And I said, thank you for that. And he said, secondly is he didn't shut the snow gate soon enough. He was halfway through my driveway before he got it down. And then he was halfway down the block before he lifted it up. And I said, that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm training my people to run them. And you might have been the first time this person ever operated, and yours was the first street he was on, and he was trying to get used to the adjustments and lever. That's why it was important for me to get the operators used to these, because it scares them at first. There's a lot of stuff going on within a motor grader, and then add another knob in there to control. That's just another thing for him to look at. So it's important for me to do that. But they have been all out, and they've been scattered throughout the city. I can't even tell you where they've all been, but I know they've always been out, and they've been scattered throughout the city. So with that, I would open it up for questions.
Are there questions? Councilor Anderson, please.
Sorry I was late. Galen, I want to ask you some questions about right at the second week of December. We had several snows that may not have been 2 inches, but as they accumulated, it really did start building up on the streets. And as I noticed it, I sent an email to Mark Cotter on it. Thank you for replying as quickly as you did on that. But what was our strategy in that time period? Were we just waiting for the snow to accumulate and hoping that it's going to melt, or was that something we were waiting for it to accumulate before we were going to try to plow everything?
That's a very good question, because I've received that a lot. On December 4th, we received, that was a Thursday, we received 6.2 inches of snow. We went into a snow alert declaration and sent everything out and plowed the city. We had the plows, the city was plowed on Saturday. Sunday, we got about 1.9 inches of snow. 1.9 inches of snow by itself didn't hit the criteria I was talking about as far as declaring a snow alert. So we will go after the emergencies, the secondaries, and around the schools. And we treated it like that. On that following Tuesday, we received another over an inch of snow. And so now we're starting to have these repetitive snows, not really any one of them triggering a snow alert, but they're starting to build up in the residential areas. The supervisors and I are monitoring those residential streets. And so what happened was, about a week after those, there was 4 snow events that came through after the December 4th snow declaration. There was 4 events that came through, all small amounts, and we made a decision that we had to go in and plow residential streets. The emergencies and secondaries were fine, but the emergencies were packed. So we actually went in and plowed off every residential street there was, trying to avoid putting a lot of snow in people's driveways, but it was necessary to do it because, again, my mission is to make sure that all the streets in the city of Sioux Falls are safe to travel on. And I was finding that residentials were in that area where we needed to really closely monitor them or do something. I decided to pull the pin and do something with them. We plowed them off. Right after we did that, we got another several snow events that came through where it was less than the inch, but it was still causing some issues in residentials. And before Christmas, we went in, and I've probably never done this in the 8 years that I've been with Public Works, but we went in and actually sanded every residential street. And then we found out that the recipe wasn't really working for us, and we changed it. Instead of a 10% salt and sand, we went to 30% salt and sand, just because the temperatures were so cold and it wasn't allowing my salt to really react very well. We upped that, and we started to get it to break through for us. And in years prior to this, normally what we'll do is we'll get a snow event come in, and we get a little bit of weather recovery, temperature recovery, and a lot of times we'll get a 1-inch snow event, and I'll get some temperature increases that will kind of melt that off. But this year with the extreme cold, nothing's melting. And so it's just continually building up. So our strategy is that we'll still kind of keep the criteria for calling a snow alert, but if we get multiple small events, we're going to still monitor the streets to make sure they're safe and have to go in and plow them out.
When I sent the email, it was about December 16th, 17th. At that point, when I sent it, I was even unsatisfied with some of our arterial roads at that time. And I had a lot of people come up to me and talk about residential streets. And that's the reason why I sent that. So I guess what I look at is that, the citizens of Sioux Falls and snow removal, and we've stated this before, is, they look at certain aspects of that snow removal that's what they want. And I think in this time period, we didn't get there. And I think that over the last few years, we have been very frugal, with our money. We've actually saved money over the last few winters. We've had some nice calm winters. This year, it's been a little more brutal, but I hope that we look at that a little harder and make sure that we keep the streets up to the status that the people of Sioux Falls want.
I can certainly do that. Yeah, as we got another clipper coming in this weekend. Looks like it's going to be less than an inch, but again, all that accumulates on the surface, and where we don't put residential streets, which makes up 2/3 of the miles of the city of Sioux Falls is residential streets. that's something we just can keep a keener eye on and take a look at it. Interesting point you made, though, about arterial streets. I actually sent a sample of our liquid into Denver to be analyzed because I thought there was something that was going wrong with our I didn't think the formulation was what we had received in the past. Came back identical to what we had been using for the past 8 years. So it all points again to the extreme cold that we have. It's just really hard for chemical to react when it's that hard. The chemical relies on it to lower the freezing point to a point where it can start making a little bit of a liquid brine, and then the wheel traffic out there kind of mixes it up, and it can start getting this water running in the streets. I just wasn't getting that to happen for me with these really cold temperatures. But we can certainly monitor these residential streets harder than what we have been.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Councilor Stegers, did you have a question? I'm sorry.
No, I didn't.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions for Galen? No, we're good. Thank you very much, guys. Thanks a lot.
Every day gets better from here on.
Yeah, it's going to get warmer soon, right?
Is that a promise?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, if I may, one,
Yes, Councilor Anderson?
with your discussion on GPS, is that just for street department vehicles, or are we having a discussion for citywide, all city equipment being GPSed?
Right now, I'm looking at street equipment, primarily in the snow removal aspect of it, to figure out what the expense is. Once I get the expense nailed down, then we can take a look at what it will cost to have the street division snow removal equipment installed with that equipment, and then we can see how it goes state or citywide.
Is fleet involved in those discussions?
Yes, they are.
too?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Good. Anything else?
Counselor, I can share too, this is the year where we're actually, for our water billing software, so when a customer calls in, whether they're having a plumber come to their door, if they need a meter set, we're adding that technology in our service vehicles because our new software module will allow it. So it's starting to happen. Ultimately, you know, there's some really good tools out there as well for like the maintenance side, the sweeping teams, and so more and more. We've learned with the recent testing of the snow gates and that application that's that technology is here local, and then what Galen's team researched today, that it's not a matter of if, it's when. And so ultimately, after they start to really hone in on what vendor, we'll have a good idea of price, and then in future budget discussions, we'll bring those forward.
Thank you.
Thank you. We do have a land use committee meeting immediately following this session, and we will need 10 minutes to reset here, so I will adjourn this meeting at this time. Thank you.